Jenny Vrentas from the New York Times is here with us now. She's done incredible reporting, as she always does as an investigative and enterprise reporter for the Times. Old friend of mine as well. She's been covering this story from the beginning. It's good to see you. Thanks for making your Brother from Another debut. And it's so good to have you on a number of levels. But I'll start you with this, Jenny, because Michael and I had a pretty in-depth conversation about it early on in the show today. And we'll get to the particulars and what's next. And he's being deposed again tomorrow civilly and what have you. But first and foremost, given everything you know, how should we be discussing Deshaun Watson,
right,
given the events of Friday? What's the most responsible way to discuss what happened and the process moving forward?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's great to be on the show. Thanks so much for having me on. And I think that question that you just posed is really an important one, because there was a ruling or a decision made by the grand jury on Friday, and that decision was not to bring criminal charges. So what happens in that hearing is that the grand jury is presented with evidence and information by the prosecutor, and ultimately they decided in 9 cases they did not see that there was probable cause to indict on criminal charges. But that's one part of the process. There's, of course, the 22 civil suits. Those could be settled at any time, but they're ongoing now. I think I've been reporting this story for a year, and my goal all along was to find out as many facts as I could, take the steps to corroborate those facts, and then put out whatever corroborated information that I had. And I think through that reporting, which included talking to people who said he engaged in misconduct towards them in massage appointments, seeing some of the corroborating information they had, such as messages after the fact, I think that should not get lost in the fact that there were no criminal charges. Just because criminal charges aren't brought, right, doesn't mean there was no wrongdoing, just as the case would be if criminal charges were brought. It didn't mean that the person was necessarily guilty. It's just one part of the process. And I think we see that sexual violence, the criminal justice system is often ill-equipped to have it. There often isn't the kind of hard and fast evidence, video, photos, those kinds of things that we like to rely on in a lot of cases. But I think the responsible way, to get back to your question, is to discuss in full what information is out there, to not rely on only one part of the process to say this means X, Y, and Z. There's a lot of parts of the process, but more important, there is a lot of information out there that points to some form of wrongdoing. A grand jury decided that didn't rise to criminal charges, but that doesn't mean that teams shouldn't look at the information that is out there about some of the behaviors that have been alleged.
Yeah, that's a great way of describing it, Jenny. Very clear, very in-depth. I'm wondering, based on what you said, hey, the grand jury decided that they weren't going to go forward with a criminal case against Deshaun Watson. But I'm wondering, because of that, did you hear from any of your sources? Was there dejection, or is there continue to be optimism that the truth, from their perspective, the truth will get out? I'm just wondering what you heard after Friday.
Well, it was interesting because the proceedings were totally private, and I was, in a hallway with other reporters outside the grand jury room. There was a separate entrance for the members of the grand jury and also the several women who were subpoenaed there. So we didn't actually see anybody go in and out. What I can say is, in the days leading up to the grand jury hearing, there was an unusual amount of anticipation for a grand jury. Normally, this is just kind of one piece in the process. It's not the end all be all, but I think because of the stakes here, there was so much buildup for what the grand jury would do. I mean, obviously for Watson, he did not want to face criminal charges, and thus hoped, as if he didn't face criminal charges, he could be traded from the Texans as he's requested and resume his football career. And then I think the importance of the day for the women was that they could bring allegations or accounts against a star NFL player, a public figure, somebody who has a lot of power in the local community, and that those allegations would be taken seriously.
Jenny, you and I have talked before, so you'll appreciate where I'm coming from with this. I've always hated being, and I know I speak for Michael too, hated being the black guy that white people would ask to come on to speak for all black people. Don't mean to put you in a position of being the woman to have to carry on this conversation or to hold our hand in this conversation, because like we said earlier, it's incumbent upon men to learn how to discuss the topic of sexual assault and sexual violence responsibly if we're ever going to dismantle a misogynistic system. If it were left up to women to dismantle this system, it'd have been dismantled already. Men have to take the lead on these conversations and learn how to talk about it properly. I say that to say this. This is what I was struggling with earlier. I find that neutrality in conversations like this is not only paramount, it's uncharacteristically uncomfortable. Usually it's easier to be neutral than to pick a side. In this one, it's incumbent that we both presume Deshaun Watson's innocence, because that's the system that we live in or govern under, until proven guilty in a court of law, but at the same time, respect the stories of women, believe women, take these allegations seriously. How do we better as a society, because Twitter was toxic on Friday. How do we better
on Friday?
Marry
Not
those
just on
two?
Friday.
Oh, yeah, I know. I limited it to Friday.
Yeah.
I know, right? Like, any day ending in Y, Michael. But Jenny, how do we marry those two seemingly incongruent concepts of innocence, but we need to take this seriously and far more often than not believe women? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, and it's a great preamble to the question, and I appreciate everything that you said. And I also appreciate the opportunity to talk about this because I have spent, a year reporting on it and speaking directly to the women. So that is experience that I have that I welcome the chance to discuss. I think it's interesting because we're talking about it in the context of expecting that the criminal justice system could bring a resolution that is in line with the facts. And I think we don't always know that that's the case in any situation, right? And I think that's especially true with sexual violence because there is such a desire for hard and fast evidence. And oftentimes in these cases, evidence doesn't exist, which, for instance, I think that's why you see some women go through the civil process rather than the criminal process, because there's more of a potential to get some kind of resolution or some kind of ruling versus the criminal justice system, which, is a higher burden of proof and more difficult to go down that path for a number of reasons. I think in covering this story, to answer your question, my North Star has just kind of always been the facts. Like, what facts can I find out? What facts can I verify? And just present those facts. And so for me, I think two things that were important were being able to corroborate two of the accounts independently. One was a massage therapist named Mary. We told her story in March 2021, right after the first lawsuits were filed. She didn't file a lawsuit. She didn't go to police. But she had an experience with him where he behaved inappropriately in a massage session, and she wanted to speak up and share her account to sort of lend credence to the other women coming forward. And I can speak with strong confidence in Mary's account because I saw the messages she exchanged with him afterward, in which she said, I only do massage. You made me a little bit uncomfortable last time. I spoke to the relative she called immediately after. And also importantly, there were text messages she exchanged with there was a veteran massage therapist who had set up her appointment with Watson. And that veteran massage therapist said in messages with Mary, whether the creepy stuff is his intention, he does it every time. Only one person hasn't complained. So I thought that was one strong piece of information that I've seen firsthand. Another one was in Ashley Solis's account. She was the first woman to file the lawsuit. I also reviewed messages sent the day after her incident. So before any of the legal process unfolded, the day after her appointment with Watson, a colleague of hers reached out to a veteran therapist. It actually happened to be the same therapist that set up Mary's appointment. And Solis's colleague was asking for help. She said a professional athlete had solicited her colleague and they didn't know what to do. So to me, those were two key pieces of in a type of allegation where there isn't always a lot of evidence. I thought those were two strong pieces. And the other thing, too, was that the warrants, the police issued search warrants last fall as part of their criminal investigation. And these were two female detectives with the Houston Police Department who spent about a year on the investigation. And in those warrants, they referred to the 10 women who filed criminal complaints as credible and reliable. So I think as I've been trying to report on the story, again, guided by the facts, I think those are some of the key facts that regardless of what the criminal courts or the civil courts decide, I think those are important things for the public to know. They're important things for teams to know. And they're really, important to the overall conversation about this.
So my last question for you, Jenny, is, based on the facts that you've gathered and facts that you know, very simply, are you surprised that there was not a criminal threshold through the eyes of the grand jury?
Well, I'm not a prosecutor. I wasn't in the room. I wasn't a member of the grand jury, obviously, right? So because the process is private and secretive, I don't exactly know how the case was presented. I don't even know what charges were considered. The prosecutor didn't specify the 9 counts that were being considered. We basically were told there were 9 no bills, and that was it. I did try to learn some things about the proceedings. Some of the video interviews that the women had given with police were shown to the grand jury. I know that only one of the women who was subpoenaed to potentially provide testimony was actually called in front of the grand jury. So I don't know a lot about the process, exactly how it unfolded that day. So I can't really speak to the decision. The truth of the matter is they decided not to bring criminal charges in Harris County. And again, going by the facts, I think that is an important piece of information. But I also think, again, there's other pieces of information that can lead to a, discussion about whether wrongdoing was committed, even in the absence of criminal charges.
Appreciate your thorough reporting, Jenny Vrentas from the New York Times. It is again, I keep saying neutrality in this case is uncomfortable because everybody wants the facts to fit their theories instead of theories to suit the facts. And it makes reporting in this day and age kind of challenging, I imagine. But we appreciate how thorough you've been, and we appreciate your hard work. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the thoughtful questions.
Hey, thanks for watching Brother from Another on YouTube. Make sure you hit subscribe before you leave, and be sure to watch us 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Peacock. Appreciate you.